No, no buzz. The Just Bees Book Club. This is a fun find. I did not know this existed until I was doing a buy at the bookstore that I work at, and it immediately caught my eye because I've like been peripherally aware of Alexander Kluge for a long time. Um, Sort of one of the founders of the new German cinema. I don't think I've ever actually seen anything of his, but also know he's a writer. And I love Gerhard Richter. Specifically, maybe this will be in the thumbnail. I guess I can probably do that very quickly. So whatever, if there's a painting in the background of the thumbnail, that will be my one of my favorite paintings of all time, called Seestück or Seascape, 1971. Um, it's a really cool painting of the sea and the sky. Excuse me. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to look at that painting again because I like it a lot. So yeah, this is a collaboration between Kluge and Richter, an artist I've always been interested in, an artist I quite like, even though I've sort of limited my exposure to him. Like I don't really know his abstract paintings very well or his figures. I didn't know he did photography, for instance, which is what he provides here. So Kluge writes text. It's The title is December, and it's formatted as a sort of, I guess it's formatted as a calendar, a set of calendar stories, um, which is interesting because there's a lot of discussions of calendars in here as well, which is very fun. I wonder if I can find my favorite page very quickly. Let's see. Yeah, see that? Ooh, ooh, no, that one. Just a page that says calendars are conservative. It's the page after the completion of the 31st of December 2009 intro, or intro, a little story. Um, so it goes chronologically through December, but chronologically, meaning, it starts with 1st December, 2nd December, etc., etc., etc. But it's anywhere from the 1st of December, or whatever day of December, 19 or like 2009 ish. I think it's probably the latest ones because it was initially published in 2010, and goes back as far as a December in 21,999 BC. I think is the oldest one. Generally, it jumps between the early 40s, the mid 2000s. I want to say those are probably the late 2000s. Those are probably the two biggest, like late 30s, early 40s. I want to say there may be something in like the 60s or 70s, like one or two things, but yeah, it's mostly sort of jumping between the beginning of World War One and sort of the present day of at the time writing. And the subtitle in German was 39 stories, 39 pictures. Is that right, or is it photos? Um, do That's not very helpful. um, uh, December 39 Geschichten, 39 Bilder. So whatever Bilder means, I think it's probably photos. Um, uh, and yeah, so Richter sort of provides the photos. I was going to say there's like a photo for every story, but that's not exactly true. Sometimes there's none. Sometimes there are multiple stories for one day, so that takes up a whole page. Sometimes there's a whole page spreads of photos. Um, I went back and forth on the photos because a lot of them, so we start in the sort of near the front, right? It's a lot of like very snow-covered, leaveless branches of trees, almost exclusively for the first like 40 or 50 pages. Um, and like they're good. I'm not like a photography expert or critic in any way. It's probably my least engaged with form of visual art, honestly. I back when I was regularly going to museums, I would honestly kind of walk past most of the photography exhibitions. Just never the form I had a ton of affinity for. I prefer abstractions in these ways, not like abstract art necessarily, but Um, But on the other hand, I do love cinema. There's like neat bits, like you can't really see it. Oh, you can kind of see it. Like on this photograph, there's like a little dappling of red that is like sort of striking, and it's very early, and then it sort of the color sort of leaches out. There's like bits of greenery here and there on like the evergreen trees. I couldn't tell you what kind of trees any of these are because I don't know nature very well either. So like it was an interesting thing because like the main reason I came to this book was because Gerhard Richter's name was on it, and then it's a bunch of his photographs, which I like. Which is like, oh, well, that's not exactly the genre of thing that I love of his, but you may have been able to see. Like the painting of his that I love the most is extremely photographic. It is he is playing in sort of the like in the space of what is the term? Not just realism, but like photographic realism. He's playing the space of you look at the thing and you can't immediately tell that it is a painting. It looks kind of like a photograph until you sort of look closer. But also, the thing I like about that is that it's very also clearly not a photograph because of the because you can see the paint, which is a thing. So it's a thing that looks like it should be a photograph, but also just has glob, like the sort of like the strokes sort of emphasize the paintedness of the thing, which is a large part of why I love the painting so much. And so reading these stories and sort of breezing through the photographs was like not exactly how I expected to go through this book when I didn't know anything about it, but it was how I found myself going through it. And then I was talking with a friend yesterday, actually, and I mentioned that like one of the things that I do really appreciate is if like this was just a book of these photographs, I would absolutely have just sort of like skimmed through it and been like, cool, not for me, lovely work, sir. Whereas instead, because I was reading, I kind of found myself slowly reconstructing those photographs in my head, sort of giving myself time to think about them and sort of how structurally they fit alongside each other and alongside the stories, because they don't like illustrate the stories in any real way. Again, they're just mostly, for the first half or so, pictures of trees with snow on them, which is, true of December, I guess, but like that's not, whatever. I flipped to a random page. This is 12th December 2009. Yeah, 12 days before Christmas Eve, the waters of the heathen river Wangashu brought down the middle piers of the railway bridge which carries the Wellington-Auckland main line. Unusually heavy rainfalls are said to have been the cause. This is not a photograph of anything to do with a river or a train or New Zealand. So it's not; these aren't illustrative photos. So again, like as I was saying, sort of sitting with the text alongside the images made me sort of isolate the images and think about them in terms of like how they shared compositional elements, where their positioning sat within the text, and noticing things like the way the color sort of pops at the beginning and then sort of leaches out throughout most of the rest of the book. But the big thing, as I was flipping through it today, I just sort of like went through it and I was like, oh, there's like a read of this, because like I think this is the first photograph that includes animal life in it. It's just a very, very small deer, very far, far away. I mean, the deer isn't small, presumably. It's just a regular sized deer very far away. Sort of photographed from what's probably atop a like fairly large hill. I don't think he scaled a tree to get this photograph. I don't know. I mean, I guess it could technically be drone, but like I doubt it. Doesn't seem like it to me. Not that I'm an expert by any means. But like that's the first sort of appearance of life other than foliage, and that's what the 24th of December, 1943. It's a story about oh god, breached birth, I think. Yeah. In such a case, only the obstetric forceps, all caps, are of use, and that's a fun one. You probably can't see it, but I think there's like a little dent in me right around here and right around here. Yeah, there's especially right there. A little dent in my head because I had a very big head when I was being born, and they needed to kind of tong me out. Or at least that's a story I've told myself for a long time. But yeah, so like compositionally, right? Like just talking about the fact that it's got height on the trees as opposed to being sort of straight on in among the branches. It has animal life in it. For the Christmas Eve story, and like the pictures have started opening up a little before that. They go from being like very close on shots of branches to being a little farther away. Height gets varied a little bit, and then Christmas Eve gets that, and then like let's see, by what is it? By like the 26th, you're getting much more like landscapes than sort of portraits of trees. As silly as that sounds, again, the height is different. You're getting more of the thing itself in frame. You're getting not just the thing itself or the two things that are sort of overlapping, but like its context. And then sort of by the end, you get the first sort of indications of humanity. So in this one right here, you get a little nicely framed, I think, little copse of trees that has in the distance a house, and then at the very end, the final photograph is a road with a fence, and those are sort of the only encroachments of the human into the photography of the thing. Which is interesting because that's also the final image is also the cover image, which I don't know exactly how I feel about that. But yeah, and so sort of flipping through it, it made me engage with it in a very different way, right? Where like when I was engaging with the pictures on their own terms, or like as I was reading through, my primary mode of engagement was like, oh, that's a pretty shot. Those trees look weird and cool. They're very snowy. And then sort of the secondary sort of engagement was me sort of like lingering on the images as I read stories and sort of calling back to them and sort of reconstructing them in my head and putting them into context of each other. And then finally today I flipped through and was like, oh, there's like, it's not this, but it has, and my touchstone of course is going to be Twin Peaks opening sequence of the big shot of the trees, but it has a sort of almost filmic movement happening where it goes from in very close, sort of backs away and up, and then introduces a bit of what you could call an establishing shot, basically, right? Of this house among the trees, and then a path leading away from something. I think I'd like this book a lot more now since I've started this. That's very weird. That happens. That doesn't always happen with these, huh? The stories themselves are neat. Again, it's sort of hopping between sort of the contemporaneous moment and in World War II mostly. There's a story that, probably the standout story is one in which like I believe the narrator just sort of says something along the lines of like, when cars were introduced, no one really thought anything about getting like real fucked up and driving. And this one time Hitler was was being driven around, and somebody was skidded on the ice and nearly hit him. And if if there had been a difference of one more glass of champagne or 12 feet, Hitler would have been dead in 1941 or whatever. Which is just a neat little thing. There's like a whole narrative with this scholar who rails against calendars. We get a little bit of the connection of sort of the Nazi occult shit, with the like the Middle Ages did not happen, sort of thing. A lot of like little neat things in here. Nothing that like completely blew me away, and I'll just read one that I really liked. So after the page that I showed earlier, the calendars are conservative page. We're back. That happens right after the 31st of December, and then there's sort of another collection of things that are also just stories. And one of them I'm just going to read here really quickly. A mistake by Lenin, which had a belated effect in December 2009 and in January 2010. I should say also that these are primarily taking place in Russia and Germany. There might be a couple other locations. I mean, there's the New Zealand one, obviously, that I read from, but like probably 90%, I would say, is Germany and or Russia. On February 14th, 1918, the Council of People's Commissars decreed the introduction of the Western calendar in Russia. How imperfect is the power of the state apparatus? The new counting of the days never completely replaced the old reckoning. The people of Russia have for a long time, without knowing it, counted according to both confessions, according to the Byzantine one and the Western one that was decreed. At the turn of the year from 2009 to 2010, this led to the economic performance gap, quotes, to the economic performance gap. In vain did Prime Minister Putin attempt to deal with the irregularity. On the model of Western markets, the Christian holidays swept over Moscow and the territories beyond the Ural Mountains. They only ended, however, 13 days later, both in terms of the way it felt and as far as work attendance was concerned, so that consumption of alcohol and reciprocal invitations to holiday dinners didn't stop. But now there was Epiphany, January 6th, on top of that, in fact the much more important holy day, which would likewise 13 days of felt latitude for play. Overlapped by the new year, a considerable supply of festivities. The replacement of reality, mediated by work and profession, by a seemingly endless succession of special days is, according to the monk Bitov, equally disastrous for the body, soul, and economy. And all that because a provisional revolutionary government tried to rule time, something which only God and the people have the authority to do. The monk Bitov is one of the things I was talking about in terms of the Middle Ages didn't happen narrative stuff. I don't know. It's like I feel like that's pretty indicative of the whole. It's sort of goofy. It's like historical without wanting you to believe in it necessarily. It's it does not feel like it wants you to take it at its word in a nice way, but it also doesn't make me go like, I need to look that up to see what's going on. You know what I mean? It's a cool little thing that I'm glad to have read. Also, fun little side thing. It's from the Kenneth Baker Library. Kenneth Baker was I believe not born in the Bay Area, but lived here and worked at the San Francisco something or other. He was a major art critic for like 60 years. And I guess his library has been was given to a friend. If you look up Kenneth Baker Library, you can read the little thing. And the friend has been like cataloging the library and then primarily like giving away books. He mentions to like independent bookstores and prison reading programs or prison libraries, I think he said specifically, and little free libraries, and just like sort of like distributing the work to people along with keeping some for himself, which is neat. If I had a library to distribute, I would do a very similar thing, but avoid the independent bookstores probably, and just mostly for prison stuff. December by Alexander Kluge and Gerhard Richter. A pretty neat little thing that I would never have encountered were it not for the way my life is structured right now. Which, there's something to say for that. So tired all the time, though. Thanks for not watching.